Yeah, Hare Krishna. Dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to the daily call of His Holiness Candramauli Swami Maharaj. So today, Maharaj will enlighten us from Canto 1, Chapter 10, the departure of Lord Krishna to Dwaraka, verse 6. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Guru Maharaj, should I share the verse? Is it same topic?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nadayo Vyadaya Klesaha Daiva Bhutatma Petavaha Ajapta Sratva Bhavan Abhavam Shantunam Rajni Parahiti. Translation: because the kings having no enemy, the living beings were not only found disturbed by mental angers, mental angers, disease, or excessive heat or pain. To be non-violent to human beings and to be a killer of enemies, or enemy of the poor animals, is Satan's philosophy. To be non-violent to human beings and to be a killer or enemy of the poor animals is Satan's philosophy. In this age, there is enmity towards poor animals, and therefore the poor creatures are always anxious. The reaction of the poor animals is being forced on human society, and therefore there's always the strain of cold or hot wars between men individually, collectively, or nationally. In the time of Maharaj Yudhisthira, there were no different nations, although there were different subordinate states. The whole world was united, and the supreme head, being a trained king like Yudhisthira, kept all the inhabitants free from anxiety, diseases, and excessive heat and cold. They were not only economically well-to-do, but also physically fit and undisturbed by supernatural power, by enmity from other living beings, and by disturbance or bodily and mental agonies. There is a proverb in Bengali that a bad king spoils a kingdom and a bad housewife spoils the family. This truth is applicable here also. Because the king was pious and obedient to the Lord and the sages, because there was no one's enemy, because he was recognized agent of the Lord, and therefore protected by him, all the citizens under the king's protection were, so to speak, directly protected by the Lord and his authorizations. Unless one is pious and recognized by the Lord, he cannot make others happy who are under his care. There is full cooperation between man and God and man and nature. And this conscious cooperation between man and God and man and nature, as exemplified by King Yudhisthira, can bring about happiness, peace, and prosperity in the world. The attitude of exploiting one another, custom of the day, will only bring misery. Shri Guru Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pastyatya Desarane Panchakalpa Tarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Pevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yeah, so here we're seeing the benefit of the saintly king, and also how he, simply by his rule, everything in the kingdom works nicely. Even excessive cold and excessive heat are due to inordinances within the earth's arrangement in order to punish people who live in that region. But when there is piety, there is actually a transformation. When we first came to New Vrindavan back in the 1960s, there was tremendous amounts of excessive snow during the winter time, when the winters were so severe that animals would be lost in the snow. There was so much snow, cold during the winter time. But we saw, and this was prevalent to all of us, as time went on, the winters became winters became less severe, and the summers became more milder. And as time went on, we found that there was hardly any inordinances in the atmosphere due to the presence of pure devotional service being performed in that area of the world. So when we see pious, religious people come into an area and engage in devotional service, or if the area is benefited by a pious and Krishna conscious leader, the whole atmosphere becomes pleasant, becomes changed, because the earth is part of God's creation, and she works under his command. And so when people are religious, pious, compassionate, and following the laws of God, the environment becomes very pleasing and works according to the design of the Lord for the upliftment of the living entity. But when the opposite happens, then you find severity and inequality and inebrities, both in society and in the way the earth works to provide or not provide her service to the living entities who live on her surface. So, and the animals, we grow up thinking that animals are less important than human beings. Actually, when it comes to certain animals, they are equally as important in the arrangement of nature, and in some cases, even more important, such as the cow. The cow is an animal, obviously, but it is so blessed and so much represents pure religious principles that when the cows are taken care of nicely and they are happy, then all auspiciousness comes. There's nice crops. There is plentiful amounts of everything that everyone needs. And there is also the grace of God coming in different forms, simply by taking care of the cows. And the Manu Samhita explains the opposite, that killing of a cow is equal to killing 2 human beings. How important is the cow? When we hear Krishna's planet in the spiritual world is called Goloka, the planet of the cows. Krishna is called Govinda. He gives pleasure to the cows, to the land, to the senses. He's called Gopal. He gives protection to the cows. Many of Krishna's names and his activities both in the spiritual world and when he comes to the material world, are centered around cows. So animals are just very dear to the Lord because the Lord doesn't make a distinction like we do. That here is a lower living being and here is a higher living being. He sees all living beings as his parts and parcels, his sons and daughters, who are in different material situations based on the body they inhabit and based on the karma that they're undergoing. And therefore, one cannot cause harm unnecessarily to any living being in any part of God's creation without it being a transgression upon our relationship with the Lord. So we see here, Prabhupada makes a very powerful opening statement. There are people who like to call themselves well-wishers of society. They open houses for people who are hungry, feed the poor, clothe the needy, house the homeless. But when it comes to animals, they're disregarded, or they even engage in the results of animal slaughter, such as meat eating. So Prabhupada said it's Satan's philosophy. In other words, it's evil. It's a false sense of compassion. I remember there was one talk show where one lady, she was a champion for dogs who were being mistreated and unnecessarily killed. And so she was a champion in her area. She had written some books and she was quite noted in the public. So she was on one radio station. So then there was a question and answer session that allowed the listening audience to ask. And one of our devotees, after saying, hearing her, he said, "What did you have for lunch today?" And obviously she described, and he said, "How can you?" He said, "And a cow, this meat, this cow's meat is actually we want to make the dog our pet, and so we give so much credit and care for the dogs. But what about God's pets who are cows?" And she didn't really have a solid answer. She couldn't answer properly. She was trying to fumble her way through some excuse. So this to be compassionate to certain living entities and to contribute to the exploitation of others is hypocrisy. And Prabhupada even says here it's Satan's philosophy. Because all living entities are dear to Krishna no matter what body. And even devotees are very careful not to kill any living entities, even ants or even any kind of living entity they might find in their home or something. They very carefully remove it from the house, or they don't bother it at all, because devotees want to know that within the body of all living entities there is a pure soul, and that soul is non-different in every body. So the soul in one body and the soul in the other is equally the same. The only difference is the body they inhabit. So therefore, to cause harm to any living being unnecessarily is a transgression towards our relationship with God. And therefore it says that if any creature below the human form is killed unnecessarily or even accidentally, that living entity who inhabited that body has to take birth in that species again to finish out its term of in karma in that body. And it's also mentioned how compassionate Krishna is, that there is a statement in the Shastras, and it was also mentioned in Srila Prabhupada's lectures, that Krishna incarnates in every species of life. All 8,400,000 species of life, Krishna incarnates. So why does he do that? Because he becomes the best of that species, and then the species become attracted to him, and then they gather around him, and therefore, because of that, he elevates them on the evolutionary scale, and they make vast progress towards receiving a human form of life. And you can see how Krishna goes out of his way even to take appear in lower species of life just to elevate these. And so here, when we get to the essence of this particular point, that saintly rule means prosperity in society. Today, people rule based on personal gain, personal profit, or extended vested interests. In other words, nepotism and various types of people, leaders are favored to certain groups, and they collect taxes and they make policies to support certain groups, and other groups they either minimize or disenfranchise or even sometimes exploit. So therefore, you don't have any saintly rule in the world. And Prabhupada makes that point in here, that when there is unnecessary disturbances caused by impious leaders, then the whole society suffers. And Prabhupada says, therefore you have all these wars. He said there's always the strain of cold and hot wars between men and individuals because of exploitation of animals and because of impious rulers. So in our Krishna conscious society, we want to train devotees to actually come to the standard of being leaders within society, who can take the positions within the society and help to rule the society from a spiritual point of view. Kings like Maharaj Prithu, Maharaj Pariksit, King Yudhisthira were called Rajarsi, Raja Rishi. They were leaders. They knew how to rule the kingdom, and at the same time, they were also ruled or conducted by saintly principles, spiritual principles. They were devotees of the Lord. Even the great personalities who were above our planet, such as the Manvantaras, Swayambhuva Manu, he was a great king, ruler of the universe, and he was a devotee of Lord Vishnu. So we find that wherever that is, there is prosperity. There is within nature, people are able to fulfill their basic needs naturally and easily, and people are making advancement towards the goal of life, which is Premupumarta Maha, developing their love for God. How important it is. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada used to say that all the problems that people are undergoing are due to bad leadership. Bad leadership. Nowadays, people don't even vote for the leaders because there's no one to vote for. Sometimes they say you have to vote for the lesser of the two evils, but even that doesn't solve any problems. Even Srila Prabhupada used to say, when I was a young man in India, they would come and take me to go to the voting places, but I would refuse to go. I didn't believe in these leaders, so I never took part in the system of election. So we can see, saintly persons can see through the facade of these so-called leaders who are lying and cheating the people at every minute, causing high taxation, and coming up with programs that really don't benefit anyone, and collecting, as we say, a lot of taxes. The taxes are, many of it go to padding with large salaries for these leaders and their assistants. So today's society is topsy-turvy. Therefore, the only solution is Krishna consciousness. And hopefully someday we will see, as Lord Chaitanya's movement increases, that saintly persons will rise to the positions of leaders in society, and society will be more governed by at least moral principles and religious principles. And that'll be all brought about by Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement as we purify the world. Otherwise, there'll always be so many problems, diseases. One of the greatest diseases in today's society is anxiety, mental agonies. Prabhupada mentions it, disturbances from the body, just like people are dying from cancer regularly every day now. Cancer is something that is a feature of the modern age because people are under stress and anxiety and live outside of the natural rhythm for the human being. I'm here presently I'm here in Govardhan Echo Village, and the atmosphere is such a dichotomy from my experiences in cities that it's like a different planet. It is a different planet. Everything is geared to Krishna consciousness. The environmental arrangements does not disturb the natural flow of the environment. And there are no cars to exude horrible fumes. And the atmosphere is filled with nice animals, many programs to uplift the devotees to spiritual life and material improvements. And at the same time, they're very quiet and peaceful. You can actually chant Hare Krishna. When you first come into this environment, after being into the cities for a period of time, one of the things you immediately notice is that you start hearing the ramblings of your mind. When you're in the cities, because the cities are so cacophonious, it's so much even if there is not so much noise, just the noise of the billboards and advertisements and various types of electronic engagements, it just absorb the mind, and the mind is just can never find a moment of peace. When you try to become peaceful, you fall asleep. That's how it is in these, what we say, exploitive type environments such as cities. But when you come to a natural environment, for instance, here we are in Govardhan Village, we start to understand, well, what is real life? How one can be peaceful naturally without any extra effort. And everything is filled with prosperity based on Krishna consciousness. So it's a microcosm that is being developed, which we will see and will soon become more and more prominent in the world as more people become disgusted and fed up with this present society, which will eventually implode. We were talking about that today and yesterday, and also a few days ago, how the cities are so bad with pollution, noise, traffic, and confusion that if it continues to go in that same direction, it will eventually, be finished. And it'll destroy itself because it's unnatural. It's so bad in certain places in the world. And of course, what to speak about crime centered around drug addiction and various other forms of illegalities. So this is Kali Yuga, but there is a golden age And therefore, to help bring in the golden age means to support the principles of simple living, high thinking, Krishna consciousness. One should work in order to bring about that in their own area, first in their own life and in their own areas. So as a service to others and to humanity in general. So all of these anomalies that we see within human society at the present are just what they are. They are just like sores on the body. So if we apply the medicine, Nechi Asari Maya, Nasi Badalagi, Harinam Mahamantra, Lao Tu Magi. We play the medicine of the holy name and live according to religious principles and sustainable material principles, which were taught and lived by in Vedic culture years ago, then there is prosperity, happiness on the material level. And at the same time, when people are making progress towards the goal of life to go back home, back to Godhead. So you see here the benefit of a saintly king, and you see the opposite in the present civilization. We as devotees, we don't run for public office. Prabhupada did start that when he began the movement. He started the In God Free Trust Party, where devotees were running for president of the United States. But then after some time, he saw that why waste time with this? We found it a good opportunity to preach our philosophy in the form of presenting ourselves as candidates for office. But Prabhupada, after a while, decided we are more like Brahmins and not so much Kshatriyas. We are meant to give direction to society. And as society starts to crumble, then devotees will rise to the situation and take positions within society and gradually turn the society into a Krishna conscious entity. That's Lord Chaitanya's movement. It's happening from different angles of vision, but it will eventually apply itself in due course of time, as Lord Chaitanya has guaranteed by his words. So, so here we can see what is not, and Prabhupada explains that, yeah, what is actually devotion to Krishna, and ultimately, when there's devotion to Krishna, everything else follows. The material is simply a shadow of the spiritual. When the spiritual is there, the material will follow in the same way. When the spiritual is not there, the shadow of material life becomes the focus, and therefore everything becomes topsy-turvy. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you very much for this very nice class. Yeah, you said, like, when people are religious, compassionate, and like they experience all pious, that's a very nice thing. So we need to be very compassionate to all living entities, even animals also, we need to be very compassionate. So as you said, and as you said, like, all this leads to the goal of life is to understand love of God, Krishna conscious. When you're Krishna conscious, everything is falls in place. So when there is no devotion to Krishna, then material energy will start working on us. So we need to, thanks for reminding us again and again, like we need to develop that pure devotion to Krishna, then everything will be taken care of. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'll open up for the questions. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, if you have any questions, comments, or realizations, please you can unmute or you can type in the chat box or you can raise your hand. I already see Sridevi Mataji. Yeah, please go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for this lecture, Guru Maharaj. My question is, at one point you said, Krishna incarnates in all the species of life just to elevate the species of the living entities of that species, every species. So let's say, I mean, Krishna incarnates in some animal species as whatever, and then because he's so attractive, all the other animals or birds or reptiles or insects are attracted to Krishna. But then how do they engage in devotional service? Because they're in animal or reptile or insect body. How do they, get elevated?
Attraction to Krishna is one of the principles of devotional service. It's called neutrality. There's neutrality, dasya. There's no active service, but that attraction, just like if you sit in front of the deity and you just take darshan of the deity and you appreciate the beauty and compassionate form of the deity, that's a form of devotional service. It's called abhikshnasna. Abhikshnasna, which means simply no service, but appreciation or attraction. So that's actually there even in human form. The animals immediately get, or even the insects get attracted to Krishna in that form. So they get elevated. They don't go back to Godhead. They go faster through the chain of the living entities and can be elevated to a very high position where maybe in the next life or very soon they will take birth as a human being. And it's mentioned in the Bhagavatam, that statement.
Where can I read some more about this, Guru Maharaj? Krishna incarnating in various species of life?
And it doesn't speak about that in detail, but it mentions it in the purports and also I think in one translation. I'd have to do a little research. I've heard Prabhupada speak about that also directly in his lectures.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj, for explaining that.
It shows how much Krishna loves the living entity. He's willing to even become a cockroach, just to elevate the cockroaches.
Mm-hmm.
Can't imagine that level of compassion.
Thank you. Thank you, Sridevi Mataji. Devotees, any questions?
Of course, when he comes into any material form in this world, his body is not material, nor does he touch the material energy.
Mm-hmm.
He's always transcendental, no matter what form he takes.
Yes, thank you, Guru Maharaj. Rajesh Prabhu, please go ahead.
Krishna Di Maharaj, Krishna, all assembled devotees, my Dandavat pranams. Maharaj, I just have a question. So, you explained so nicely, and we sort of taught that this material world is a poor reflection. It's not a good mirror image at all of where we're, our real home, and where we're from. So, in these earlier yugas, where animals and people were more at peace and rest, under saintly rule, could we still think of those places and the material world as being poor reflections, or were they sort of less bad reflections? And would people then have less incentive to kind of follow the path of Krishna consciousness if they were so happy and well looked after?
Prabhupada says the material world is more or less different grades of material suffering. Sometimes it's not so bad, and sometimes it's very bad. That's the material world. So you can't make a nice place here. So, you know, when things are apparently going nice, you can know that that's not going to last for long. It's just the way material energy is. It's called mutable. I mean, material energy is mutable, which is changing it. So nothing is permanent here. So what goes on nicely for a little while, because just like we say, the golden age is such a yuga. And as the yugas continue, the quality of life diminishes. And you come to Kali Yuga, and then after, when it goes to the utmost level of degradation, it comes to again to, then the Lord comes to usher it back in the new Sachi Yuga. He does that personally. So it's to say in any way that just like stool is stool. So there's wet stool and there's dry stool. So you might say, oh, this is dry stool. It's not so bad. This wet stool is terrible, but it's still stool. That's the material world. You know, it might be a little better sometimes, and then it goes down again and goes up again. It's just the way it is. The material energy is like that. But then when you have saintly people ruling, and then you have Krishna consciousness, then things go towards elevating the living entities away from this material energy towards their ultimate place in existence, back home, back to God in the spiritual world. So the reflection is either apparently nice or apparently ugly, but it's still a reflection.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Thank you. Scarlett Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to Guru Maharaj and all glories to some devotees. Thank you for the class. I have two questions. It's almost as they go together. The first one is some country, because you named the snowing and it was very bad, but then when the activity, the spiritual activity was good there, then the weather got better and so on. So I wonder, there are some country that they have different season and everything is good, and they don't have as much as problem is as many countries now going through, and then but they are not very spiritual active. They are not. They just live their life. They don't. But they don't fight with anyone. They have their own life. What is it? Should I understand of that? That it's not time for them to know anything about the Lord, or they have done good in previous life. That's why they have this good life. How should I understand that? This is the first question. The second question is.
Yeah, hold it there. Don't go. Don't give me the second.
Okay.
Yeah, just like the United States of America, it was a pious country when the indigenous Americans, which are known as the native Indians, were living there. And therefore, people were coming from Europe because it was a land of plenty. And that was all due to the piety of for many hundreds of years. So, but then when the outsiders came, they changed everything around and things went down. And then now you see that it's not the same anymore. Everything there's still some of the piety left from previous generations and maybe some piety from the present. But the land becomes pious. The atmosphere becomes pious by pious and religious activities. Just like in India, you see the sun is always shining mostly throughout all the time. When Prabhupada was in London, and he was on one talk show, one very kind of, flamboyant interviewer wanted to trap Prabhupada in a question. So he said, Swamiji, what is your conception of hell? And Prabhupada said, London, and which shocked everybody. And then he said, it's always cold, damp, rainy. So he made that point. He said, in India, the sun shines most of the time. And so wherever you find religiousness and piety, the atmosphere also reflects that. But sometimes in the present situation is due to the previous years of piety and activity, and vice versa. When some people might be pious and religious, but previously the area was somewhat irreligious, so that reflects the environment also. So you can't, the countries also have their karma. There's also country karma, aside from individual karma also. Those are just the laws of karma. Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay. Thank you. Can I ask my next question?
Did you get that one?
Yes. That was what I believed, I understood of everything I read, and I got this understanding that everything has to do with the karma. Anyway, whatever it is, it has to do with karma. That I had understand it. But when you say that the weather was very bad, but then as soon as it happens, spiritual activity happened, then it gets good weather. So I mean, if it has
not necessarily right away. No, things don't happen. It may take decades, may even take centuries for things to change. But gradually, due to the act, it's just like the verse we read. I mean, this is an indication, because they have a pious ruler as King Yudhisthira, there was no excessive heat and cold. That we just read that.
Yes. So I understand that. My next question is, there are in Sweden, we say, I would just talk about Sweden, okay? In Sweden, as soon as the animal is very sick, they use, they just kill the animal to just make it human, to make it much easier for the animal not to suffer too much. You know what I mean? And I wonder, is it okay to do that? And there might be cows that they get very, very sick, that they suffer very much because they have pain. Is it okay to end the life just to make it easier on the animal, or you have to let the animal die by itself, even if it suffers?
That's a matter of situation. The scriptures don't talk so much about that, but they do talk about compassion towards all living beings. So you're talking about compassionate killing. They're also applying that now to human beings too, who are in such similar situations where they're also suffering. So they want to, euthanasia, that's what it's called. So yeah, you start with animals, then you do it with people ultimately.
Animal can't say they have pain. The animal can't say that they have pain or how much they have pain. People can say, and they get help by getting morphine or anything to just make it easier for them. But animal can't say it. they can't say that they have too much pain or they have little pain. So they don't communicate, but people do. You know what I mean? That is what I want to understand how it.
We don't find that in the Vedic culture. Better to take care of the animal and then gradually give it everything it needs to elevate it to a human form in its next life. In other words, take care of it through spiritual principles. You don't find that in Vedic culture, or killing of animals because they were suffering is a policy that was entered into. You don't hear that at all. Try to care for the animal, and if the animal is dying, then help it to elevate it to a better birth in the next life. When God gives life, God takes life. No one else can do that. No one else has authorization to take life, only God.
Thank you. So good much. Can we go to next question?
Rajesh.
Rajesh, yeah.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, just a follow-up question, kind of related to Mataji's question and something that was in the text in the purport. So I don't think I understood this properly, but you know, Maharaj, when you explained that if an animal is killed prematurely or early, you know, it shouldn't be killed by anyone really, by us. You mentioned that the animal will then have to come back to sort of finish that life off because that life was finished too early. So was it that animal that has to come back into that to continue that life, or was it the person who does the killing takes on that life?
Well, the person who does the killing gets a karmic reaction for that, and that soul. You see, you're impeding that soul's progress on the evolutionary chain. So by restricting its life, you force that living entity to come back and finish its term of existence in that particular body. That's one of the reasons why it's sinful to kill animals or even bugs, any species. God has put that soul in that species to finish out its term in that species, and then gradually through the evolutionary arrangement by nature, it goes to the next stage. So every living entity has to transgress from one species to another until it gets to the human form. So if you stop short that term of existence in that particular body, then that particular living entity has to again take birth in that same body, in that same type of body again to finish out its term of existence.
Thank you, Maharaj. I also just understood something else that also by us trying to.
People are interfering with the natural evolution given by God.
I was just thinking that, Maharaj, that by interfering, we're almost becoming like the controller, or we're trying to take on that role of ending a life, and that's not our role to do that. That's God's, Krishna's.
Take care of animals, give them what they need to live happily and nicely.
Thank you, Maharaj. You explained that so nicely and compassionately.
I think a lot of animals suffer and die prematurely because the way they're treated. And then you want to authorize some kind of mercy killing in order to relieve it. You put them into a horrible position in the first place where they suffer, and then when they're suffering, you say, well, we'll relieve their suffering by killing them. And it's Satan's philosophy. It's like people say, well, you know, this woman, she can't afford to have a baby because because of the economics that the family is in. So they say they will think, oh, I can't take care of this child, it'd be too much, so let me have an abortion. So that's a reaction to a wrong activity. That's all it is. The idea is don't get pregnant in the first place if you can't do that. If you're not going to be able to support a child, why even go through the process of pregnancy? But people can't restrict their sense gratification, so they have wanton sex activity, and the result is they commit another crime by killing the child prematurely, using very so-called principles that either economic, difficult for the parents, or just benefit for the child. You know, they come up with all of these reasons. But the original sin is the fact that people can't abstain from controlling their sin. They can't control their senses. That's why Vedic culture teaches, you know, the different stages of life. And the first stage of training is brahmachari, to learn how to control the senses.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So, Guruma, just a follow-up question. Like you mentioned, like a saintly rule leads to prosperity. So, whatever common people are undergoing sufferings, it's a collective karma, right? It's both individual and collective karma, right, Guru Maharaj?
Well, there's suffering caused by different kleshas. Klesha means discrepancies. So you have sufferings caused by higher powers, such as, you know, viruses, excessive heat, excessive cold, earth-type cataclysms, droughts, famines, tornadoes, earthquakes, forest fires. All of these are due to the sinful activities of people. And that's more on a collective basis.
So, Guru Maharaj, when devotees, when neophytes practicing Krishna consciousness, we are trying to be Krishna conscious, we are chanting Mahamantra. So, when you are chanting, our individual karma, it's helping with, to reduce that. But when it's coming through higher things, so will that also, it helps?
Well, yeah, because not everyone is subjected. If you take shelter of Krishna, although you're in the midst of a very difficult environment, you're protected. Krishna protects his devotees. If they take shelter, engage in devotional service, and especially if they chant the holy names, then they're protected. Krishna is the protector. If you take shelter of him, despite even if there is a collective karma around us that is causing that area to suffer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Guru Maharaj, yes.
Sometimes even devotees get pulled into that environment because of the atmosphere.
Yes, Guru Maharaj, yeah.
For devotees, it becomes a disturbance. For the non-devotees, it becomes worse than hell.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. I have two more questions. Scarlet Mataji, can I go to Raj Prabhu? Then I'll come back to you. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, Mataji. Raj Prabhu, please go ahead.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to you, Maharaj. All glories to all of the Vaishnavas. Thank you for that informative and inspiring class, Maharaj. It reminded me of a class that I was hearing only this morning. Only in that class, the speaker was talking about we must be very careful not to even harm any other living entity in any way, physically or mentally, or even upset someone, and that included ourselves. So there's so much to think about there, so much to be careful about, so much to be, and the only way we seem to be able to do that is to be connected to Krishna 24/7.
Yeah, a Vaishnava is a well-wisher and doesn't cause any disturbance to any living entity. That is a Vaishnava.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you. It's very difficult as 24 hours, we need to always check our consciousness. Thank you. Yes, very much. Scarlett Mataji, yeah, please go ahead.
It makes me wonder, because I always also read everything happened according to the plan of Lord. Everything happened according to the Lord Krishna's wish. What I'm thinking, for instance,
but he doesn't authorize your sinful activities. You
no. What I mean, no. I was trying to come to the point there. For instance, when I go out, I go with walker, and I don't see where I'm going. I can't see everything when I'm going, and there are ants, there are insects, there are so many things that maybe I drive over them and stun them without knowing it. I do that. So I mean, I'm not going and looking where I'm going to stun, and this is killing also. This is even by breathing. As I understand, even by breathing, I'm killing unseen, lives. So what I mean is, could it be that even though I don't like to stamp on the ants, but when I walk with the walker, I don't see. So is it the plan that they have to die in that way, or do I get their karma because of I didn't see it, and then that's why I'm going to get the karma?
Chant Hare Krishna and you'll know everything. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
If you're engaged in devotional service and if you accidentally kill a living entity, there is no reaction for that. But if you're not engaged in devotional service, and even if you accidentally kill the living entity, you're accountable. That is from the Shastra. So if you're walking to the temple with your apparatus there and you're going to see the deity, that means you're engaging in some future devotional service. You're not responsible. You're going out to watch a movie, then you're responsible.
No, I'm going to doctor. I'm going to my doctor.
I'm using it as an example.
Okay.
You're going to the doctor and you're walking, just chant Hare Krishna.
Okay.
And don't say, well, I can't chant Hare Krishna. No, you must. That way, if you somehow or other accidentally kill a living entity, then there's no karmic reactions. Jiva jiva sajivanam. Even when you breathe, even when you smash slices, so many things, living entities are dying simply by the existence of another living entity. Oh. And everyone's responsible for that. That's what the material world is like that. But if you engage in devotional service, then you're not, you're free from that reaction. But you still should be careful, even though you're engaged in devotional service. You try to be conscious to avoid causing any harm to other living entities, even as a devotee. But if there's some accident, some unconscious activity, although you're still trying to avoid that, there's no reaction. Okay? I think you work too much. Chant Hare Krishna, you won't.
No, I promise. I promise. I only go now out only when I go to the doctor or to my gymnast healthcare center. Only when I go buy some food and come home. I promise you, I don't go to cafeteria or I go to the cinema. Nothing like that. I promise. And I chant. I walk and I chant. I do it, but still I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I can't help it. I'm afraid I can't help it. I'm so sorry to say that. I'm afraid. So that's why I want to know what. I don't do anything that I'm going just to do it for myself and because I want to have a fun. It's not that way. It's not that way. But still, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and be happy. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mataji. Dear devotees, any last minute questions for Maharaj? Questions, comments, or realizations?
He's a character.
Yeah, Gurumaj, I don't see. Gurumaj, just I was listening to your class recently where you mentioned like the distinction between material and spiritual. It's because we are not spiritual. So when we are spiritual, everything is like spiritual. There's no material. So being in this material world, also doing our duties, also we can, when we connect to Guru's instructions, everything is spiritual. Guru Maharaj, is that understanding? So
The complete simple definition, anything connected with Krishna is spiritual, anything not connected with Krishna is material. That's spiritual.
So whatever activities we are doing, if we do it according to the instructions of Guru and Krishna, it's again spiritual, even though it's a material duty.
Right.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Thank you again for this very nice class. I don't see any questions. Devotees, any last minute questions? Thank you very much. It's 1 hour past, 3 minutes. Thank you again for this wonderful class and reminding us to be Krishna conscious. Yes, Sridevi Mataji, I see your hand raised.
Guru Maharaj, so seeing this verse and how important it is for the prosperity, for the well-being of all to have saintly rule, should devotees try to get elevated to positions of power where they can make a difference in the world?
We're not against that, but we don't encourage that at the same time. If a devotee has a position in the material world, then use your position to propagate Krishna consciousness and religious teaching. Not that you have to take a position in the material world to do that. If you're a doctor, just like we have our Tulsi Gabbard, she's a congresswoman from Hawaii, and she's a devotee. She's a devotee. She was initiated she was sworn into her office using the Bhagavad Gita, not the Bible, like they usually do. And she's very vocal. She very speaks out. But how much can she do from her position as a congresswoman? But she's trying in some way to give some stability and morality into the sinful lives of these politicians. But she can't come out and just simply preach Krishna consciousness, although everyone knows that she's a very religious person. So you can, you may be able, if you're in that realm already, then use your qualities to further religious principles. But it's not that you have to go for that and then try to make it happen by entering into that. Prabhupada started that in the early days with the In God We Trust party, but then, and after a while he disbanded. So that, we don't want to waste time, fighting in politics.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Thank you, Mataji. Yeah. Sorry, Guru.
Srila Prabhupada
Ki
ki
jai. Krishna Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Maharaj ki jai. All Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhishya kripa sindhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mata.
Devotees.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.